All right, we are live. Welcome to KiteTalks. This is Arup Sons here. This is, I would call it a special edition for us. I have a dear friend, ex-partner, friend, colleague, multiple things, fish thali eating comrade. We have Prashant Khanna with us. Prashant, thank you for taking the time out. Really appreciate it. Prashant's the head of technology and operations for Star Sports. We are honored to have you.
Thank you so much. I mean, I'm glad that you could take out some time for me as well. So that's a good thing.
No, awesome. PK, most people know you. Like I discussed, the idea of this conversation again is casual, but just you've spent 20 years, right, in professionally working, moved to Bombay many years ago, and continue to be there. And again, you've sort of started off in the entertainment industry, and I want to maybe start about early on in your career. I know you're working with Star now, but maybe that's sort of, you've come full circle, because back in the day, I would say 17 years or so ago, you did work with Star at the time. Just want to maybe start there, and I know you and I know each other well, so I'm going to maybe jump into a bunch of things during this conversation. We'll try and keep it short and crisp, but let's start with your journey at Star, back in, or what is it, 2003, I would think.
Yeah, I think it was, if I remember correctly, I think it was around 2000, end of 2001, 2002 beginning. And, where I was more like a freelancer before I joined them full time. But yeah, it's been an interesting, I've more recently in quarantine, I've started reading a bit of, Talib. And that's when I realized, he speaks about randomness and, how things are never really planned for and nothing can be planned for. And, when I look back at the last 17, 18 years, I realized, I never probably imagined I would be doing this and I'll be here. And, it's like, I would say things happen. And, it was a very, very different entertainment and sports business 15 years ago than what it is today. And it's, evolving continuously. So, yeah, I think, early on in my career I've played professional sport myself, from cricket to, football in school in general, and then just outside of that. And I did a bunch of things, from managing a dance school to DJing a little bit to managing nightclubs in Delhi. I think it was more just getting out of college, and when I stopped playing cricket, little jobs you could find with friends, and stuff that was generally happening around to be within the circle and, enjoy yourself at the same time. So I think that's where it started out for me. And then, I had a dear friend at that point in time who was studying in Mumbai, at the DY Patil College. And, he reached out saying, you've done so many events and stuff like that. Why don't you consider coming to Mumbai? And, it might be interesting to see with this skill set, because there is little that you can do in Delhi. There's just a bunch of events, or they're far and few in between. There wasn't real structure like it is now. Probably pan India in terms of industries and stuff like that. So it was exciting. I'd never been to Mumbai before. And I said, let me go. So it's funny. I just picked up my bags. I think this was just after I'd finished college, and all my certificates and everything from school, all sporting events and stuff, and just put them together, and pretty much a backpack, and landed up in Mumbai. And as luck would have it, you generally go around, meet people and stuff. In a couple of months, I met an ex-colleague from actually my ex-classmate from school, a senior who was doing some stuff with Star at that point in time, and some really interesting stuff. So I don't know if if when you watch movies, or in the earlier days when you would watch movies, and when the movie gets over, there is a scroll that comes with all the titles at the back, into right towards the end, right? And at that point in time, Star started, they were called digigrams, and it was interesting because you would squeeze that to half of the screen, and then you would promote the next upcoming event or film,
Okay,
and
right.
you would do a voiceover on top of that, so the scroll's pretty much running, and then you're talking about what you're going to see next,
Uh-huh.
because you didn't have any split windows and stuff like that at that point. So that was the project. It was really interesting, and a lot of stuff would actually go into it. So right from coordinating with a voiceover artist, booking time at the studio, bringing him in, to getting the films that were going to get promoted on the FPC from a channel point of view. So they'll give you the entire month, recording the entire month. The script would be written by somebody else. So it wasn't that
Movie in a
straightforward.
movie. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it was. I mean, although you would wrap up, say, I would in a 8-hour shift, you would probably do about 2 weeks, of movie promotions, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah.
But you still had to make sure the 2 weeks was written by somebody and it was relevant and somebody in the channel approved it. And so I think it was more coordination. And I mean, I started right at the bottom, pretty much. So, I when I actually started walking through the the offices and stuff, and I was like, this is the place I need to work. I need to make sure that I get employed by Star at some point in my life. However, I had no real in television you don't really have a professional degree that you can do. Maybe
Yep.
mass comm and stuff still existed, but I think that was more relevant for journalism and stuff like that. And there was no real uh, defined program for being a content head or working in content in television, or
Yeah.
marketing or sales and stuff like that. So it was, I think, even the market was evolving at that point in time. uh, so yeah, from that point on, I think I was hanging around there quite a lot for people to believe that I used to work there permanently, till I think somebody in HR walked up to me and said, what do you do and stuff. And I think I landed up having a basic conversation, and they had a really interesting position open at that point in time, which was uh, a, a, a team that was called the response team. And
Okay.
and response was essentially people used to write into their favorite stars, and and all
Right.
of those were letters at that
Yeah.
point in time. People would post them, and their queries, and they had an
You're
opening in the
making yourself sound old. I'm just letting you know.
no, people should, I mean, everybody should know I started really young, right? So just out of college, and so it
Okay,
was
fair enough.
so I think I had to earn my bread right from the get go, pretty much.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then so the response team was, they didn't have a single member in that team. I think it was a department that started with me.
Yeah.
And I was told, so I went through a bunch of interviews, even for a role at that level, or that, which I thought was probably just above, a office boy, pretty much. So, that's where it started out for me. And, I had to make sure every single day, go up to the courier desk and pick up these bunch of boxes with letters and basically segregate them and make sure that they go reach out to the respective teams, whether it was sales, marketing, operations, and then eventually collate the replies and then reach out to the viewers. So I mean, that was an interesting space. I mean, where it meant you were interacting with both the viewers. Had, even though you would write your name as the response team, they started believing that there was an individual behind this. So there was a kind of a bond that you would establish with them, where they felt that they were the connect between you and the star in the
Yeah.
show,
Yeah.
pretty much. Or so it was. I think I made a few friends, informally as well out of that. While that was happening, I realized, with family being in Delhi and I being in Bombay, on my own, exploring things. I think I was spending close to about 18 hours in office, pretty much, trying to look at different things that were happening. So it was more, I would say it was more on the job learning for me. And that's when, another department which has now become extremely big in India, called standards and practices, which is the censorship function, which is
Okay.
now being employed. Now you see a scroll running below every
Yeah.
channel that
Yeah.
says, if you have a problem with this content, report to
Mm-hmm.
the I think there is a committee now and stuff. So at that point in time, Star was doing their own programming, and there was a conversation about moving it from Hong Kong to India. And they couldn't find anybody who was free enough and loitering about in the office. So they picked me up and said, would you mind going into Hong Kong for a while, to pick this department up and see and bring it back. And again, I was surprised. I was probably at an executive level at that point in time.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I mean, it's worth it. And I went and did my training for, I think, about 3 odd weeks, came back to India and started the first SNP function. And it was really interesting because you were getting now paid to watch television. So you would watch shows and point out people who are smoking, people who are drinking, any foul language, all of that. So everybody would come to you. You started looking at programs differently, where if the flag was upside down, whether the substantiations in commercials was saying the number one toothpaste really meant they were number one, in terms of paperwork that you were getting.
Yeah.
Because from a viewer's perspective, everything that you put on the channel, um, you were responsible for it, even if it came as being created by somebody else.
Yeah.
So it was a really interesting time. We were launching multiple channels. There was Star Plus at that time. Of course, there was no sports. We had Star Plus, we had Star Utsav and a bunch of channels that star movies. And so,
Right.
I would take home VHS tapes of like 10, 15 movies at a time, watch them, come back with cuts that you would recommend, internally, and then they would remaster it. So the team started growing from there on in. It was my job to make sure I couldn't possibly handle that many channels and watching that many hours on my own.
Yeah.
So I had an all women's team eventually, 6 women that became part of that team.
Wow.
And now every single department across the television network in India. So if you take Sony, Z, Viacom, Star, every single SNP function and the teams that are being led there have either worked with me at some point in time, or I have actually trained them at the beginning of their career. So it's a really, even the kids networks, so Turner and
Yeah.
Discovery and some of these places. So it's really interesting, so that was a phenomenal phase. At that point in time, that particular department merged into the operations and technology function, and that's where the technology bug bit me pretty much. So
Yeah.
at that point in time, it was more like, this is something that's exciting. How do you make sure it goes on air? How at that point in time you had these big massive machines that would a single machine that had this big digi-beta tape that you would put inside the machine.
Yeah.
And that machine was probably as expensive as a premium car at that point in time. So I remember we used to carry it physically to the VSNL office in Mumbai. You had to book in slots, make sure you uplink it to Hong Kong in that given slot, and this is when all the shows like Kyunki Kahani, all the famous soap operas of, that time were being sent almost a day before,
Yeah.
they were supposed to go on air. Till a point we realized that, this was becoming an expensive proposition. And then suddenly, it was decided that we'll start flying people with tapes. We used to call them tape monkeys at that point in time. So, it was a really interesting phase. You get a paid holiday for 3 days. The office would pay for you to go drop the tape off, stay in a hotel, for 2 nights and then come back. And I think there was a point in time, if I look at my old passports now, I think I've done, if I'm not exaggerating, at least more than 200 trips, in that 2.5, 3 year period, where, I knew the menu on the aircraft, I knew the people, I could pretty much count the number of steps to the elevator and stuff like that. So it was really, really interesting time. You learned a lot about the transmission, how things were happening. And like I said, I think it was purely by doing my time and, making sure I was available for pretty much
Yeah.
anything that they asked me to, or for within the teams. I was able to look at multiple of these functions,
Yeah.
during that time period. I
I,
think sorry.
no, no, sorry to cut you, but
Yeah.
normally in these talks we go chronological order, right? But I want to do it a little differently with you. If now you fast forward to where you're at now, right?
Right.
You're talking about like back in the day, all these. Now, if you think about it, they're like these archaic sort of methods of doing things. If you draw parallel to what say you're doing now from a technology point of view and the size and scale of things, I mean, can you like just maybe tell us a little bit about what's happening now versus how do you see things different, more people, more technology, more again just
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, what you mentioned, I mean, I would say the transition was happening. We moved from tape, we are now completely tapeless, file based workflows. everybody talks about the cloud. You know, a lot of people talk about the cloud as if content just disappears somewhere. You know, it's effectively the same machines. You know, they're just co-located somewhere else. You know, you are
Yeah.
now more connected. You know, internet and fiber connectivity has become really, really big, and I think a lot of that existed. You know, however, you know, with so many platforms now coming in, visibility, you know, that's what's changed drastically. You know, all of us are content producers. You know, that's exactly what we're doing
Correct.
right now. You know, which didn't exist earlier. You know, you had to invest in infrastructure and a setup to be able to even do a small show. Now people
Right.
are actually doing it with a cheap mobile phone that's probably, you know, 10-15,000 rupees at best.
Yep.
So I think that's where it's changed a lot. It's also meant a lot of opportunity. It's given a lot of freedom to people to be able to do things. But I think one thing that, you know, probably is not changed for the good is that everybody believes that there is a shortcut to, you know, doing things. You know, you just, the amount of time that we spent, you know, in the first 10 years of my career, you know, doing things, I think there is no substitute to doing time and, you know, learning things in that way, you know, which has been a big change that I see now. You know, some of the kids that I interview, and I call them kids now, you know, just out of college, and I think I didn't know my head from my ass, and, you know, excuse my language, but I had no clue at 22, 23 what I was doing, you know, from
Yeah.
the initial things that I mentioned to you about my career. You know, things just came up and you picked up. You know, kids today are very clear, and, you know, people today are very clear on what they want to do. But with all of that also comes a fact that, you know, they just believe that, you know, by doing 6 months or 1 year, you know, they are experts in the space that they're in.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so I think those things have changed. Technology, yes, has moved pretty fast, I would say. And if you ask me, the maximum transition of technologies happened in the last 6 weeks. You know, so actually
Wow.
COVID has led to technology transformation more than any organization pretty much put together. You know, you've been forced to look at things that you've never seen in, you know, in the way that you probably have.
Yeah.
You know, we at Star have been, I would say, the leaders in terms of exploration of tech, you know, on all aspects. But the way we've transformed in the last 6 weeks, even we didn't imagine, you know, how the way things would actually turn out.
Crazy.
So I think that's, you know, to your point, that's what's been really, really different between now and then. You know, but, and it's become open. You know, anybody can launch a channel. You know, whether it's a YouTube channel or, you know,
Correct.
whether it's a digital platform. A lot more people, I think, are being able to use their expertise. I think similar to sport in the media industry as well. And, you know, even if it's broadcast for sport, for example, there is so much content now that you actually need skills for to be able to produce those. You know, you need
Correct.
skills to be able to deliver those, you know, in the right manner. So, and we'll always, you know, struggle for that. That was probably not the case earlier. But to
Hmm.
give you an example, when Star does, you know, or when an event like IPL happens or a World Cup happens, and if you're doing production out of India, we run out of talent. You know, whether
Yeah.
it is directors or whether it is vision mixers or whether it is, you know, producers, there are just not enough people there. And, you know, I think there is serious scope now for, you know, people to look at those areas to really pick up and grow. So,
Yeah.
you know, the actual program that you see, or actual team that plays on the ground, you know, there are a bunch of, you know, or a battery of people at the back end, from physios to, you know,
Correct.
coaches to whatever that, you know, put that together. So,
Yeah. So I'm going to now again go jump back back to your time post Star. I know you spent some time at Turner. I know honestly we don't have so much time
time,
because
right?
at the end of the day,
Correct.
like the amount of experience, and you and I have had lengthy conversations on night after night. But uh, I want to talk about the time when of course you and I met, and at that time you were working with Reliance Studios and Reliance Media Works, right? And managing their studio in Goregaon, and at the time that was the studio hosting the IPL, well, extra innings,
Right.
and of course at the time the rights were with Sony. Tell us a little bit about that experience and sort of how that also sort of changed your learnings and perspective, and obviously by then you realized, okay, listen, you were inclined to sport, you were trying to find your way, saying that, okay, how do I get more and more involved in sport and move away slightly from the entertainment side, and get into this piece, because I know you were upskilling yourself at the time, also doing your masters online from the Cruyff Institute. So again, like for me, I've always looked up to you because you're constantly looking to learn, right? You're constantly looking to find something to do, and no, I mean that's fantastic, and I think you still have that drive. But let's go back to that experience at Reliance, and I think you spent a few years there. So
Yeah, I think what you mentioned is in a as much concise as I can put it. I think I'd spent a large time with broadcasters, and on that side, I always was inclined to sports, but I just didn't know how to channel that direction.
yeah,
That's why I landed up being probably the first Indian student at Cruyff Institute, because there was nothing here in the ecosystem at that point in time
yeah,
that was structured enough. And luckily for me, in a way, our meeting was purely accidental, and the way you were looking at sport and how you came back actually fueled my whole ambition of saying maybe I could do stuff. And we did landed up doing a bunch of things with together at that point in time. But Reliance was really interesting because I was always a client. This was an opportunity where I would actually become a vendor. And
right,
how do you make sure that you bring both those skill sets of the ability to be able to negotiate and wait for meetings outside, like we unknowingly used to make people wait, things used to overrun, and it humbles you a lot. It makes you understand how to run a business. I was asked to handle a P&L across 3 functions when I moved into Reliance, and it really expanded my horizon of saying, it's not about sport as a fan sitting in front of the TV. Sports is also business at the end of the day,
yeah,
and you have to make sure that that business is run prudently and efficiently. So, once you're part of sport, and that's what I realized with some of the stuff that we did together, is you're never going to enjoy sport the way you've seen it, all your life once you start
correct,
working in sports. So,
yeah,
I think that's what it changed a lot for me, from that point in time. While we had the foundation, and on uh, the business side of things, and what I when I landed up consulting with the Hindujas as well, it was really interesting. You were always a partner agency to a big client, and always being looked upon to either look for solutions, or how do you make sure that you are making yourself relevant constantly. And I think, to your point, it just made me grow holistically really well. And and it helped me so much at my second stint, to a point where from being a local vendor, or a global company, but being a local vendor with Reliance or Hindujas, to eventually taking the plunge to go to Singapore, and be a part of a global, service company,
yeah,
meant that it changed the entire horizon of, yes, I had spent some time in Hong Kong working, and I traveled quite a lot during, over those years. But when the call came to me from Star Sports when I was there, I was very clear, and I did my second masters at that point in time in Singapore.
yeah,
I did my football coaching program from the Singapore Academy, and while I was doing all of that, I studied at INSEAD, in digital strategy for a little bit. So I think all the education that I uh, did not complete initially in my years, I'm making up for it now pretty much. But yeah, it was an interesting space. And when they reached out to me, I was very clear that I want to go back for sports. That is something that drives me, quite a lot. And I realized that now, in 2.5 years, I joined Star Sports, and from the time that we got the IPL rights, transitioning a 10-year-old property to the size and scale that we
right,
were able to do, the multiple events that we had, I revamped the studios, completely. Of course, there was a battery of team, being the first broadcaster in the country to do remote production. My previous experience of my negotiation skills, and, the partners that I had developed globally,
yeah,
with the interactions, whether it was Turner or whether it was, Encompass, just helped me so much more, and uh, to be able to, within my first year, and, although it's slightly confidential information, when the Disney deal happened, the company reached out to me within my first year for me to be retained as the top 100 employees. And that makes, that just made me feel that, I first thought within the first year, who's going to notice, it takes people 6 to 7 months to actually get integrated into a system.
yeah,
But I was coming back to an organization where I knew some people who had never left. They were there for 18 years, 20 years, whatever period of time, when I was really small, and, they were within the organization and they were there. So it was easy for me to navigate. I had serious challenges within itself, a lot of resistance, in terms of the way a large organization works. You are expected to be an entrepreneur and still drive things on your own and take
yeah,
responsibility and stuff. So it was phenomenal. I think what we've achieved, And what I have personally achieved, in the last 2.5 years, I can easily say it can take people close to about 5 to 7 years in a space of time, because we moved from being a startup broadcaster in sports,
Yeah.
because sports was only 4 years old when I moved into Star. And now we're 2015 to effectively now is what, 5 years pretty much. It was 2 years actually at that point in time. We've done serious amounts of stuff. I think we're way ahead. I've been speaking to people at the NFL. I've been having conversations with people at by virtue of some of the global rights that we have. We work with Fox, ESPN.
Yeah.
I was in the US last year, in fact, January this year, to, at Bristol, Connecticut, to see the ESPN facilities. And I have to tell you, I think we're technology wise, a lot more advanced than some of those
Wow.
facilities that we see.
That's
So it was really phenomenal to see that, unfortunately, we don't brag about it as much, and we are
yeah.
hoping that we can as we go along. But it turned out to be really interesting. So I think that entire experience of dabbling in multiple things, and by sheer virtue of being slightly uncomfortable, I'd never been a vendor. The first time I walked into a meeting and somebody spoke the way they spoke to me, I was like, "Was this is not really happening?" Till it was a reality check saying, I'm not on the other side of the table at this point. So I think it was really humbling. And I'm mindful of the fact when I invite people now for meetings, to make sure they're not waiting for longer, make
Yeah.
sure they're treated the way you want to be treated yourself. And I think those experiences have helped me really grow. Making sure you get your hands dirty. It
Yeah.
doesn't really matter if I have to stay back later, to make sure my team understands that I'm equally invested in this, whether it's that project or whether it's something that we are doing collectively. So yeah, that's how it's been. It's been the
I
last 20 years.
I mean, knowing you personally, I know you have the drive of an entrepreneur, right? And you mentioned it a little bit just now in terms of with your current role, because I see that even though you're part of a much larger organization, that's probably how you still function. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you treat, of course, your projects as pretty much your own, and obviously your team as like, listen, I have these people's backs, like you're their employer pretty much, even though you're part of a much larger setup. Is that something that drives you? And I don't know, personally, uh, do you still see yourself maybe doing something, I mean, as an entrepreneur at some point, or maybe on the side? I don't know if you want to say that now, given the fact that you're with the organization. But I mean, more the question is more of the way you function, and is that drive like an entrepreneur, and you see yourself as one within this larger setup.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing that you bring up. I mean, just for the record, and you spoke about people believing I'm much older. I just turned 40 last month, so with a 20-year career, I think that's a decent amount of time with me. I used to feel happy that I was 39 till last month, and not even in my 40s. But yeah, that's. But to your point, it's I've realized, and working with you, and I think in the current climate, I don't know if it's a good idea to be an entrepreneur in the first place, but
It's probably the best to be a student, saying that, okay, let me just study, and and
I worry
and
about
maybe
it.
two years out, let me worry about the.
Yeah, that's
But yeah.
true. But what I've realized is, in a large organization like Disney or ESPN or Star,
Hmm.
you pretty much function like an entrepreneur. Even if you're part of the organization, it's there are so many multiple things and moving parts to it, that you can honestly be in multiple organizations being in one at the same time, if you
Yeah.
hang around for a number of years.
Yeah.
But having said that, sometimes you realize that you're probably the best commander for a ship, but you need a ship to be a commander of. And I think
True. True.
I've kind of sort of come to have that realization that I need some sort of a structure to be able to thrive in.
Yeah.
But and I've constantly thought about it, saying, maybe I can be an entrepreneur, but and if I can do this for somebody else, at that level and intensity, I'm sure I can do. Even if I do 50% of that for myself, it would turn out better. But I think I've never really taken that. They say that you have to take the plunge and then try and see. I mean, I did that with you when we were together, but you did most of the doing even at that point in time. But in that sense, when I now look back, with family and parents and responsibilities and stuff, I think I'm probably not 100% sure, but when I look at my last 20 years graph, I think anything is pretty much
Yeah,
possible,
never
because
say
you
never.
can
That's
never
true.
really, it could be forced, or it could be by choice, or it could be something that I realize over a period of time that you're
Yeah,
pretty much done with,
yeah,
doing a job. But yeah, it's I think it's I mean, I hats off to people who are entrepreneurs and who still pursue that passion, despite all the obstacles, because it brings so many more responsibilities, not
yeah.
just on for yourself, but people that work for you, people around you, and all of those things.
Let's. I know we're almost time. I want to maybe and little bit on a lighter note. Um, you've you are, I would say, a hardcore fan, right? Always been, and I know you're somebody who makes sure that your even your family knows, like, listen, if it's game time, it's game time. There's no two ways about it, right? And as much so that you own shares to, I mean, to the club that you love, Manchester United. So just I want to sort of end in this conversation more on a fan's perspective. How is that also driven you to be who you are as a person today, and who what you do in the world of sport? Because, like, I mean, you mentioned it earlier. At the end of the day, as your perspective changes when you work in the business, but at the same time, you're always a fan. Right? You're always
Absolutely.
going to be one.
Right.
And I think that's, I mean, you were a fan first. So yeah, just want to, I mean,
Yeah,
hope
I mean, in
that,
fact, to mention, and it's interesting you bring that up, because, it's me being fan. I realized that, when I was reading all of the stuff about, in this period when there is no sport really, and, my favorite club, United, and which got voted the best team in the 21st century on Eurosport, also. That encouraged me to actually just enroll in a program for sports journalism. So I said, if I can, at this point in time, with all the
always
technical
learning, man.
experience,
That's so awesome. I love it. Sorry, go on.
yeah. So the idea was, maybe if I can, I read so many stories, maybe I can extrapolate them, if I have some a formal training to be able to express my ideas, even if it's my own blog. And I know it started with you at the first time when I saw, you writing your blog and how you used to capture, all your thoughts and ideas. So it's been interesting. And that's where, this, thing came to, I think as a fan, I realized that, one, it brings the child in me, every single time I'm watching it, and that's what keeps sanity intact to a point where you don't want to grow up too soon. It brings that passion, and I think that teamwork, it's phenomenal to see. I have realized this now, that there is nothing that you can do on your own,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely nothing, and even the biggest superstar has a battery of teams behind him, to be able to support. So I think
yeah,
that's what it's brought, the passion and drive. People always ask me, it's a different team in another country, how do you even relate to it? It's like, sports is boundaryless, and the best part is, it's the best conversation starter,
true.
if you're a United, with a United jersey in Goa, you'll probably get free food and beer once in a while as well,
That's
somebody who shares the same passion. So yeah, it's been, I think that's what, being a fan has been for me.
No, that's awesome. No, but PK, thanks so much for taking the time. I'm gonna just leave any last words for our audience, be it again, and anything that you have to say, given the current scenario, or in general. I mean, at the end of the day, there are so many takeaways from the just the last 30 minutes. But yeah, any closing thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'm assuming, your audience is, kids from college, school, a bunch of professionals and stuff. I think so. It's, I think if you can take from my example, take that anything can happen, and don't feel let down by the external factors that you can't control. I mean, there's something that will go on for pretty much ever. If you're kind of sort of level-headed and controlled within you, you can pretty much see over everything. And this COVID will bring phenomenal opportunities. I think both in the space of sports, technology, pretty much everything. I think, and you'll see more people getting employed because just the thought of, I think 3 years work will happen in 1 year. So
Yeah.
everybody should be prepared for that. And I think it's going to be a really interesting time. The next few years will, I think, you'll see more growth, more stuff happening pretty much in every sphere. So I think that's my one takeaway that I see. Just stick to it.
Awesome. No, superb. Thanks so much. Really appreciating the time, and I know this conversation will continue.
No,
And
thank you so much. You take care and stay safe, and I hope everybody else is taking care and staying safe as well. And yes, hope to see you soon, either
yeah,
in person for our fish
yeah.
thali or on a call next time.
Awesome. Cheers, buddy.
Cheers. Bye.